The exile. The cold wind howled through the dense forest as Elias trudged forward, his cloak wrapped tightly around his body. The moon cast a silver glow over the treetops, illuminating the narrow path ahead. His breath was visible in the icy air, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Elias had been banished. The very kingdom he had sworn to protect had turned against him. False accusations, whispered conspiracies, and the betrayal of those he once called friends had led to his exile. The king, once his mentor, had declared him a traitor, and now the bounty on his head was enough to make even the most honorable hunters track him down. His fingers grazed the hilt of his sword, a weapon that had once commanded respect, but now marked him as a fugitive. He had nothing left but his name and his will to survive. As he pressed on, the forest grew eerily silent. Something was watching him. He could feel it. His heartbeat quickened as he drew his sword, the blade gleaming under the moonlight. Then, from the shadows, came a low growl. A pair of glowing amber eyes emerged from the darkness. It was no ordinary beast. It was a shadow stalker, a creature rumored to haunt the exiled and the forsaken. Elias braced himself, gripping his sword tightly. He had faced many foes before, but this was something else. The creature lunged. Elias barely dodged in time, rolling to the side and slashing his blade through the air. The stalker was fast, unnaturally so. It circled him, its growl vibrating through the trees. Elias steadied his breathing. He knew he had to finish this quickly. If he failed, his exile would end in death. With a swift feint to the left, he tricked the creature into lunging again. This time he was ready. He spun, driving his sword deep into its chest. The stalker let out a deafening screech before collapsing into the frost-covered ground. Elias stood over the fallen beast, panting. His exile had only just begun, and already death had come knocking. He sheathed his sword, casting one last glance at the lifeless creature before stepping deeper into the unknown. Rise of the Terran Empire. In the wake of the First Interstellar War, humanity stood at a crossroads. The devastation wrought by the conflict had reshaped Earth's political landscape, uniting once fractured nations under a single banner. From the ashes of old governments arose the Terran Empire, a powerful and centralized authority determined to ensure humanity's survival and dominance among the stars. Under the leadership of Emperor Alexander Voss, the newly formed empire wasted no time in consolidating power. The first order of business was the reconstruction of Earth's war-torn cities and the restoration of its battered economy. With unparalleled efficiency, resources were funneled into rebuilding infrastructure, establishing new industrial centers, and bolstering scientific research. One of the most significant advancements during this period was the development of the hypergate network. By harnessing exotic matter and quantum entanglement technology, scientists unlocked the secret to instantaneous interstellar travel. This breakthrough allowed the Empire to extend its reach far beyond the Sol system, claiming uncharted planets and establishing colonies in distant star systems. The expansion, however, was not without its challenges. The Empire encountered numerous alien species, some peaceful and others hostile. Diplomatic negotiations led to alliances with select civilizations, while skirmishes and full-scale battles erupted against those who refused to submit to Terran rule. The most formidable of these adversaries was the Zelari Dominion, an ancient race possessing advanced weaponry and formidable war tactics. Their conflict with the Terran Empire would become a defining struggle of this new era. Despite external threats, internal dissent also threatened the stability of the Empire. Resistance movements emerged, objecting to the Empire's militaristic policies and authoritarian governance. To quell unrest, the Imperial Security Bureau was established, enforcing strict laws and eliminating any perceived threats to unity. Technological innovation became the backbone of the Empire's strength. Artificial intelligence, cybernetic augmentation, and genetic engineering were all pushed to new heights. The Imperial fleet, composed of state-of-the-art warships, patrolled the Empire's growing borders, ensuring security and maintaining order in its vast territories. By the end of this era, the Terran Empire stood as an unrivaled force in the galaxy. Its expansionist policies and military might had cemented its place among the cosmos' greatest civilizations. Yet, as history has shown time and time again, the seeds of rebellion and downfall are often sown in the midst of a golden age. First contact with enemies. The wind howled through the desolate valley, a constant reminder of the harsh environment surrounding the squad. The sky, a dull gray, seemed to press down on the soldiers below, as though the heavens themselves were aware of the impending danger. Sergeant Riley led his team forward, his eyes scanning the rocky terrain, searching for any signs of movement. They were deep in enemy territory, and the tension in the air was palpable. For weeks, the squad had been on the move, trekking through forests, across rivers, and over mountains, all in pursuit of an enemy force that had been causing havoc along the borders. The higher-ups had given them a simple task: find the enemy and neutralize them. But as always, things were never that simple. Riley's squad was an elite unit, trained to handle the most difficult of missions. They had been through countless battles, each one testing their resolve, but none had prepared them for what they were about to face. The enemy they were after wasn't just any militia or rebel force. No, this was something far more dangerous. They had heard rumors, whispers of a new faction, one that operated with ruthless efficiency and had access to weapons and technology far beyond what the regular forces could muster. These rumors, however, were more than just talk. The intelligence they had gathered pointed to the fact that this enemy was not only a well-organized military unit, but also something far more sinister. As the squad advanced, Riley's thoughts raced. He had always trusted his instincts, and right now, every fiber of his being told him that something was wrong. They had been walking for hours without encountering a single sign of life. No animals, no people, not even the faintest trace of a footprint. The area was eerily silent, the calm before the storm. "Stay sharp," Riley said over the comms, his voice low but firm. "I don't like this. Keep your eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary." The squad responded with a series of affirmations, each soldier checking their gear and scanning the surrounding area. They had been trained for situations like this, where danger could strike at any moment from any direction. They knew the rules: trust no one, expect the unexpected, and always be ready for a fight. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the valley, followed by a burst of gunfire. The sound of the bullets whizzing past was enough to make the soldiers instinctively hit the ground. Riley's heart raced as he quickly assessed the situation. The squad had been ambushed. "Take cover," Riley shouted, signaling his team to move into defensive positions. The squad scattered, finding shelter behind the boulders and rocks that littered the valley floor. Gunfire erupted from all directions, the enemy hidden among the cliffs above. Riley's mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. The ambush was well-coordinated, and the enemy seemed to know exactly where the squad would be. This was no random attack. It was a message. "Command, this is Riley. We've been hit. Requesting immediate backup." "Over," Riley said into his comms, but there was no response. The signal was jammed. "Looks like we're on our own," said Corporal Daniels, his voice tense as he peered around the corner of a rock, his rifle raised and ready. "What do we do now?" Riley cursed under his breath. He knew they couldn't stay in cover forever. The enemy would eventually flush them out. They needed to act fast. "Move out," Riley ordered. "We need to take the high ground. Get to the cliffs and establish a defensive position." The squad began to move as a unit, pushing through the hail of gunfire. Riley led the way, using his training to quickly navigate the rocky terrain. He knew that the cliffs ahead would give them a better vantage point and a chance to turn the tide of the battle. But as they advanced, Riley's instincts screamed at him. There was something off about this attack. It was too precise, too well-planned. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded into a trap. "Watch the rear," Riley barked. "Something's not right." Just as he finished speaking, a deafening explosion rocked the valley. The force of it sent Riley crashing to the ground, his ears ringing. He pushed himself up, his mind racing as he scanned for the source of the blast. "Report," Riley shouted, his voice hoarse from the impact. He wiped the blood from his brow and surveyed the chaos around him. All clear, Sergeant, Corporal Daniels said, his voice tense but steady. We've got wounded, but we're holding. Good. Keep moving, Riley said, gritting his teeth. He had to focus. They couldn't afford to let their guard down now. The squad continued their advance, but it was clear that the enemy was closing in. The terrain was unforgiving, and every step felt like it brought them closer to danger. But they had no choice. They had to fight, had to survive. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the cliffs. Riley took a deep breath and surveyed the area. The high ground offered a better perspective of their surroundings, but it also made them vulnerable to an all-out assault. They had to make a stand here. Set up a perimeter, Riley ordered, his voice sharp. Get the wounded secured, and let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next. As the squad fell into position, Riley couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The enemy they faced was unlike any they had encountered before, and their tactics were as ruthless as they were effective. Riley knew they would have to adapt, to outthink and outfight this new threat if they were going to survive. The squad was in position, waiting for the next move. Riley looked around at his team, his family. They had been through hell together, and they would face whatever came next together. But deep down, Riley couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. He gripped his rifle tightly, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. The first contact had been made, and there was no going back. The war was on. The war for independence. The struggle for independence has always been a defining moment in the history of nations. It is a period where people come together, often in the face of insurmountable odds, to fight for their right to self-determination, freedom, and autonomy. In this chapter, we will explore one of the most significant wars for independence that changed the course of history. The war for independence not only shaped the destiny of the nation involved, but also influenced the world, setting the stage for future revolutions and the rise of new global powers. Background of the war for independence. Before the war began, the nation in question was under the control of foreign power that had ruled for many years. This foreign power imposed heavy taxes, restricted trade, and limited the freedoms of the local population. Over time, resentment grew among the people, who began to see the foreign rulers as oppressive and unjust. However, the seeds of rebellion were not planted overnight. They grew slowly as the local population became more aware of their own power and potential. The catalyst for the war was a series of events that heightened tensions between the rulers and the ruled. The oppressive laws and taxes imposed by the foreign power created widespread discontent. Moreover, the native population was increasingly exposed to ideas of freedom and equality through trade, communication with other nations, and intellectual movements that were sweeping across the globe. It became clear that the time for change had come, and the people were ready to fight for their freedom. The initial struggles. The first steps toward independence were not easy. The native population was divided, with some individuals loyal to the foreign rulers and others sympathetic to the cause of independence. This created a tense environment where both sides struggled for control. In the early stages, the fight for independence was largely symbolic. Protests, riots, and small skirmishes marked the beginning of the conflict. Despite the native population's desire for change, they were poorly organized and lacked the resources to engage in a large-scale war. The foreign power, on the other hand, had a well-equipped military that was capable of quelling any opposition quickly. Early victories by the foreign military seemed to suggest that the rebels would be crushed before they could gain any significant momentum. However, the rebels were not easily deterred. They continued to resist, and their numbers began to grow as more people joined the fight for freedom. The turning point. The tide of the war began to change when key leaders emerged from within the ranks of the rebellion. These leaders were able to unite the disparate factions of the population and form a more organized resistance. One of the most important figures in the war was a charismatic and strategic leader who inspired the people with their vision of a free and independent nation. This leader was able to rally the troops, instilling in them a sense of purpose and determination. With improved leadership and a growing sense of unity, the rebels began to win more battles. They were able to secure key victories that not only boosted the morale of the independence movement, but also forced the foreign power to reconsider its stance. The conflict escalated as the war spread to multiple fronts, with both sides engaging in a series of bloody and intense battles. International support and alliances. As the war continued, the rebels began to seek support from other nations. The idea of a nation breaking free from its colonial rulers resonated with many countries that had their own histories of struggle for independence. Several nations, either out of sympathy or self-interest, began to provide aid to the rebels in the form of weapons, supplies, and even troops. One of the most significant alliances was with a neighboring country that had recently gone through its own revolution. This ally provided much-needed resources and helped turn the tide of the war in favor of the rebels. The support of international allies gave the rebels a sense of legitimacy and strength, while also placing pressure on the foreign power, which was now facing a more formidable and well-supported enemy. The final push for independence. With the growing momentum and continued support from international allies, the rebels launched a final offensive against the foreign power. This last phase of the war was marked by decisive battles, where the rebels, now battle-hardened and well-equipped, fought with everything they had. The foreign military, stretched thin by the ongoing conflict, struggled to maintain control. In a series of stunning victories, the rebels were able to capture key cities and strongholds. The foreign power, realizing that it could no longer sustain its hold over the nation, began to withdraw its forces. As the final surrender came into sight, the people celebrated their hard-earned victory. After years of struggle, they had achieved their goal of independence. The aftermath. The victory in the war for independence marked the beginning of a new era for the nation. The newly formed government had to address the challenges of rebuilding the country and ensuring that the sacrifices of the people were not in vain. The aftermath of the war was not without its difficulties, as the country faced political instability, economic hardship, and the task of integrating different factions into a cohesive society. However, the war for independence had accomplished its primary goal. The nation was free, and its people had the opportunity to shape their future. The lessons learned from the war would go on to influence future generations and inspire other nations to rise up against oppression. Legacy of the War for Independence. The War for Independence left a lasting legacy on the world. It proved that even the most powerful nations could be challenged and that the desire for freedom could not be easily suppressed. The war inspired other independence movements around the world, and its effects were felt long after the final battle had been fought. In the years that followed, the nation that had won its independence became a symbol of hope and resilience. Its people had fought for their freedom and had succeeded, proving that with determination, unity, and leadership, it was possible to overthrow even the most formidable oppressors. The War for Independence served as a reminder that the pursuit of freedom is worth any sacrifice, and that the fight for justice is never truly over. New Galactic Order. The stars had always seemed like distant, untouchable beacons. But now, for the first time in history, they were within reach. The galaxy, once a fragmented collection of empires and kingdoms, had begun to unify under the banner of a single, new order. Scene 1. The Rise of the Galactic Coalition. The Galactic War that had raged for centuries was finally over. The various factions that once vied for control were now forced to reconcile with one another. The Galactic Coalition was born, a democratic government that promised peace and prosperity for all its citizens. Its assembly, led by leaders of the major factions, convened on the neutral planet of Vanaprime. The stage was set for a new era, but tensions still simmered beneath the surface. Scene 2. Council Meeting. The representatives from different worlds and species gathered in the council hall, a vast, metallic structure filled with holographic screens and representatives speaking through translators. At the head of the table stood Supreme Chancellor Elian Taris, a human leader who had played a pivotal role in brokering the peace agreement. He stood with an air of authority, but his eyes betrayed the weight of his responsibility. Today, Chancellor Taris began, we forge a new beginning. But we must remember, unity requires sacrifice. Across the table, General Soren, a reptilian leader from the Harkana species, hissed under his breath. Sacrifice? You mean submission. Many of us fought long and hard to retain our sovereignty. Now we are expected to bow to this. Coalition. Peace is not a conquest, Taris replied, his voice calm but firm. It's an agreement between equals. We must find common ground, or we risk plunging the galaxy into chaos once again. The murmurs in the room grew louder as more representatives voiced their concerns. It was clear that the road ahead would not be easy. Scene 3. The opposition's plot. Not everyone was in favor of the new order. On the fringes of the galaxy, an underground movement known as the Sovereigns began to stir. They believed that the coalition would destroy the independence of every system and species. Led by a charismatic, enigmatic leader known only as Nox, they plotted to take down the Galactic Coalition before it could solidify its power. In the dark corners of the space station Glassy 9, Nox met with his top operatives. A figure cloaked in shadows, Nox's presence was both commanding and unsettling. They think they can control us, Nox said, his voice low and dangerous. The coalition is a lie, a web of deceit designed to keep us under their thumb. We will show them that true freedom lies in chaos. Scene 4. The debate on the future. Back at the council hall, debates over the new system of government continued. Each species, each faction wanted something different. Some wanted more autonomy, others desired a larger voice in the decision-making process. But beneath the surface, distrust and old rivalries lingered. Captain Lyra of the Solara fleet, a respected war hero, stood before the assembly. The coalition is a step forward, but we must ensure that the military remains strong. Our security is paramount, and I fear that disarmament will leave us vulnerable to the inevitable rise of enemies who seek to destroy our peace. I agree, General Soren chimed in, but we must also balance that with diplomacy. The old ways of war must be set aside. This is a new age. Chancellor Taris nodded, acknowledging the complexity of the situation. We must find a middle ground. Disarmament is necessary, but so is protection. Scene 5. The Secret War. Unbeknownst to the majority of the assembly, the Sovereigns had already begun their campaign of sabotage. Their forces had infiltrated key installations across the galaxy, planting bombs in civilian areas, hijacking communication systems, and creating chaos. The attacks were swift and devastating. In the midst of this turmoil, a young intelligence officer named Rian discovered evidence of the Sovereign's plans. His superiors dismissed his warnings, brushing them off as paranoia. But Rian knew the truth. He had to act quickly. As the galaxy teetered on the brink of disaster, Rian contacted Captain Lyra and shared his findings. Together, they formulated a plan to expose Nox and the Sovereigns, but the clock was ticking. Every moment that passed meant more lives lost. Scene 6. The First Battle. As tensions reached their peak, the Sovereigns launched their first major offensive. A coalition fleet was ambushed by Nox's forces at the edge of the Andromeda system. The battle was fierce, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The galaxy watched in horror as the first shots of the new conflict were fired. Captain Lyra, commanding the Solara fleet's flagship, fought valiantly to protect the coalition fleet. But the Sovereigns' tactics were ruthless. They had planned every move, exploiting every weakness in the coalition's defenses. Scene 7. Turning the tide. Amid the chaos of battle, Rian discovered a weakness in the Sovereign fleet's communication network. Using his expertise, he managed to disable their systems, creating a window of opportunity for the coalition forces to strike back. The tide of battle slowly began to turn. Chancellor Taris, though still shaken by the attacks, rallied the council. We will not allow this galaxy to fall into the hands of extremists. We will unite, or we will fall together. The Sovereigns were forced to retreat, but their victory was only temporary. The war was far from over. Scene 8. The Price of Unity. The aftermath of the battle left the galaxy in a fragile state. Many worlds were damaged, and trust between the species was fractured. The cost of peace had been high, and the price of unity was becoming clearer with each passing day. Chancellor Tari's addressed the assembly once more. We have won this battle, but the war is not over. We must remain vigilant. The road to a new galactic order will not be easy, but it is the only road forward. If we are to survive, we must work together, no matter the cost. Scene 9. A New Hope. Despite the scars of war, a sense of hope lingered. The first steps toward rebuilding were underway. The people of the galaxy had seen what could happen if they did not come together. The Galactic Coalition was fragile, but it was alive. As the sun set over Vanner Prime, the stars shone brighter than ever before, a symbol of the future that awaited.